I'm pretty sure it's working now. So the way this is working is that this is our first time using OB Stream. And there's like a slight 25-second delay on this. And we're also aware that we've been experiencing some technical issues. We're really, really appreciative of all of you for being so patient. We're excited to be sharing space with you all. So I'm Michelle, this is Kazumi, and we're the co-curators of KSW Presents. So this is KSW Presents RA by Monica Suk, and it's part of API Cultural Center's United States of Asian American 2020 Festival, Finding Kinship. We're going to be really excited to listen to Ari and Monica read from their book today, and we're also going to be in conversation with them. And we will also be starting off with a set very soon with Kohinogrism. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that we're in a very particularly important moment right now. So it kind of feels like with every minute, we're learning a lot of things and witnessing things that are bring up a lot of grief and rage, and also sometimes hope. So just really want to acknowledge that we are in the middle of a global pandemic with COVID-19 and also generations long pandemic of anti-Blackness, anti-queer and trans racist violent systems. And none of us here in this room are outside of that. And so even through the work of art and poetry, I really want us to think about how we stay grounded in our roles of dismantling these systems. Really want to acknowledge Black organizers and their generations of work that are leading the way to true safety and liberation. And we also want to recognize all the health and essential workers for sustaining our livelihoods. And even though this is a virtual event, we would not be here together without technology. And we're benefiting from the colonization and unceded Ohlone land that many of us live on today. So we're holding all of that and all of you as we move into the performances.
All right, so as you know, APIC has been supporting us in putting on this event, and the USAAF Festival has focused on the theme of kinship this year. And so we've been really thinking about what does it mean to be together in a way that centers this idea. And so we've been thinking about the Asian American community, how a lot of the time we come together bearing the scars of violence, but how our kinship ties are not necessarily based in the violence, but that how we come together through love and recognition, and in knowing the way that our histories are informed by these many intertwining things like US imperialism, like Cold War era regimes, and how our kinship is built on offering each other these lifelines that we need to persist and to thrive. And it's both because of the violence, but also despite this violence. And that's kind of like the angle that we're thinking about with kinship. We've also been thinking through what it means to have kinship ties with those outside of of an Asian American community, and especially when we think about what it means to fight for Black Lives Matter and to be in relation with our brothers and sisters who are not Asian, right? And so thinking about our relationships there is also another form of kinship. So this reading will really be focusing on that. We're gonna have award-winning poets and children of refugees, Aria and Monica here. And so these books are gonna explore the impact of inherited, or they're already out, but in the reading they will do this, the impact of inherited wars. Aria through interrogating historical and personal implications of Afghan-American relations, and Monica through myth-making and memory-making of Cambodia and the Khmer Rouge regime. So do you want to take this, or?
Yeah, I think just like a final statement that as we're working on solidarity with the movement for Black lives, abolition of policing and white supremacy, we also recognize that as federal and municipal governance calls upon the U.S. military to enact violence on those fighting for Black lives, and there are important parallels to be made across many communities of color. We condemn U.S. militarism and state violence in all its forms, and we stand with immigrants and with refugees and with Black lives. So with that, we're going to move with a really amazing musical performance by Kohinorgasm. Kohinorgasm is a lo-fi experimental pop music project of queer mixed desi artist Josephine Shetty. And Josephine uses minimal dance beats and sussurre to vocals to create hypnotic environments in which she hopes listeners can reflect and replenish. Her songs address topics ranging from war crimes and abuses of governmental power to emotional exhaustion and body autonomy. You can listen more at Kohinoorgasm, bandcamp.bandcamp.com.
Thank you all so much for having me. I'm Kohinoorgasm, and yeah, you know all there is to know at this point about me, so I'll just get right into the music. This first song is called War Empire, and I wrote this a while ago, and it is concerning and also cathartic. It's concerning and cathartic how relevant it continues to be. And it's basically just a song about, originally I had wrote it with the intention of like calling for a divestment from war and divesting the money that we pay in taxes to war, and how complicit we all are sort of unconsensually in war and in these businesses of war and policing. And of course now with the more popularized call to abolish the police, this song is also hearkening that message of abolishing the police, abolishing the military, the prison industrial complex, and ending the racist systems of policing and militarization in our country that disproportionately target Black and brown life. So here we go. It's time, the kind of government crime never justified, so I decided that I wouldn't pay a dime to a war empire, wouldn't pay a dime to a war empire. Money is tied to every kind of government crime, never justified, so I decided that I wouldn't pay a dime to a war empire, wouldn't pay a dime to a war empire. Money is tied to every kind of government crime, never justified, so I decided that I wouldn't pay a dime to a war empire, wouldn't pay a dime to a war empire. Money is tied to every kind of government crime, never justified, so I decided I wouldn't pay a dime to a war empire, wouldn't pay a dime to a war empire. Wouldn't pay a dime, wouldn't pay a dime, wouldn't pay a dime, wouldn't pay a dime. Wouldn't pay a dime, wouldn't pay a dime, wouldn't pay a dime, wouldn't pay a dime. Wouldn't pay a dime, wouldn't pay a dime, wouldn't pay a dime. you. All right, I have one more song. Thank you all so much for joining today. There's so much going on and there's so much to plug into and there's so much work we need to do, especially as non-Black people and people of many Asian diasporas, but it's super important to plug in with community and check in and share art and make time to replenish and be with each other and be present. So I really am grateful to Kearney Street Workshop for putting this on and to the artists and organizers involved today. And I'm super grateful to be opening this space. So I will finish out with one last song. And this song in particular speaks to the urgency of social change. And so I think I want to just use this as a prayer to emphasize the urgency that a lot of organizers are coming with today. I think it's super energizing to see people taking to the streets and to be taking to the streets ourselves and acting with the urgency that these issues should have been met with so long ago by all of us and our ancestors. And so yeah, this song is called Another Day. Again, I'm Kohi Norgasm, and thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the show. That's the logic that they used to make you stay. You don't need her, you don't know another way, another way. But I'll talk that we can start another day. And I'll talk believe that there's no other way. No, I'll talk that we can start another day without a without a change. Another day, another day, another day, another day, another day, another day, another day without a change. Another day. You don't need or you don't know another way. That's the logic that the leads to make you stay. You don't need or you don't know another way, another way. But I don't think we can stand another day. And I don't believe that there's no other way. No, I don't think we can stand another day without a change. Another day, another day, another day. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kearney Street Workshop. Thank you to Monica and Arya and to everyone organizing. I'm Cohen Orgasm and I'm signing out.
Thank you. Yeah, let's get those little clapping emojis going. That was really awesome. Thank you. So we're going to introduce Monica. Is that
Aria.
we're gonna introduce Aria. But yeah, it's real great to see everyone out here. Your little icons in the chat. You know, it feels like we're together, even though we're not. Okay, you want to introduce?
Yeah,
Aria?
yeah. We're so excited to introduce Aria Aber. I'm going to read Aria's bio so we can know a little bit about her work, but super excited for this. Aria Aber was raised in Germany. Her debut book, Hard Damage, won the Prairie Schooner Book Prize in Poetry and was published last September. A graduate from the NYU MFA in Creative Writing, where she was a Writers in Public Schools Fellow. She holds awards and fellowships from Kundiman, Dickinson House, and the Wisconsin Institute of Creative Writing.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you everyone for organizing this. I'm so glad to be a part of it, despite everything going on, or because of everything going on, to have this virtual space to talk about all of these difficult things later, but also to share art. And thank you, Kohino Orgasm, for that beautiful set and opening the space. I think there should be more music at all poetry readings. It really adds a different dimension to it all. That was beautiful. So I'm going to start by reading a poem that's set in Berlin because it only feels apt to do that right now. I am in Berlin, so it's quite late here right now. It's past midnight. But yeah, it's the first poem in my book. Reading Rilke in Berlin. Into English, I splintered the way my father clutched his valise at the airport, defeated and un-American. It took me 12 strange springs to know nothing occurs out of a sudden. How do I let it go? Little has been purloined from me, and the ghosts of childhood still sibilate, by which I mean nobody has touched me on my innermost parts. At the accent reduction class, my teacher instructed me to invert my tongue like in love. So I lay at a pavement, under your elegy, in a bridge. Such starkness, the want to put inside me a perfect sentence. What would have Lou Salome done? I absolved every year around the sun, knowing that there is an animal smell hooked to a line leading past a border I am not going to cross. But what is exile exactly? What exactitude? Father says hour for hour, allo for hello. Father says is good, don't come back. eat fruit, green card. If I could explain to him the difference between exist and exit, maybe others too will hear the law in Allah. When they asked my mother, "Where are you from?" she smiled and replied, "Fine, how are you?" Oh, I shoved my hand right through the officer's mouth and ripped out his tongue. Then under my pillow, I placed it and waited for it to bloom new my blood. Um, the next poem is a poem about family, like many of the poems that are in this book, but it's a tender one, and is kind of trying to think through all the positive aspects that come with family and not just the wounds and the pain that is so often part of what I write through. And I think that it's important to make space for love tonight as well. Family portrait. The girls and I circle the wet grassed garden to serve nukhl and tea to our mothers who titter and sweat bugs on each other's arms. Yano slapping the tableau to Milad singing Rahim Rahimullah jolts my ears with its sexless faithfulness. What wrong did I expect of him all these years? Later, while our mothers snore on the living room floor, we gumshoe past Joy and Amos, pack our lives like limp geese by the neck, and let them dangle from the window to avoid looking at the faces we're about to lose. Family, to me, is only the sweat of female secrecy. Negor's body hair sings to mine as she passes me the joint, cheeks wistful with the heaven of Avron blow. Finally, Lida explains to us, Foucault, there is no invisible force to relieve us from ourselves. We are, after all, going nowhere. And I agree. Then why, whenever the bathroom reeks of sacred blood and poultry, do I begin to weep for a drill to cleave my forehead so the light can enter me in shuddering waves? I do believe in God. I do. But once Milad establishes that on Judgment Day, even our mothers will run from us in fear, I tipple the night's thick milk until it swallows me. Okay, so the next poem is called There. I'm too cowardly to hopscotch or riot against my militarized homesickness. But how could you be homesick, you wonder, denying all cahoots? I vomit buckets full of gravel, comb through Ziploc bags of photographs. Relatives uprooted, never returned. What's left of Farad, an afterthought. A cut shirt. Faisal, we don't speak of. Not yours to elegize, you instruct. But I scroll headline after headline until the French door is shards and the skin of my knuckles unlatches, blood wet and surprised, like poppies after a long, misbegotten rain. After the ER's fluorescent walk of shame, you drive me through McDonald's to get delicious, soggy fries, which I guzzle, then weep into the grease off. I, who was cultivated among speedometers and irrigation intact, who sat with scan numbers at public libraries and private schools, who broke bike helmets and was balanced on my father's feet like an airplane. Love, do I have the right to talk of there at all? You pet my shoulder, say, it's not your come from. Tuck a curl behind my ear and whisper, aren't you, after all, from here? Okay, I have a lot of poems in this book which are about inaction and holding the self accountable in the face of atrocities, because I often find myself not doing anything despite seeing all of the injustice in the world, especially when it relates to foreign policy and violence that happens abroad. And I think that this moment in time with Black Lives Matter and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all of the other Black people who have killed at the hands of police most recently, that this moment has been radicalizing me to the extent that I don't really relate to the speaker in my poems that much anymore. But yeah, I'm excited to read this next one, which is so much about not doing anything and actually just brunching instead of going protesting. Foreign policies. Entire days of gin tonics and cucumber moons, brunches with friends politely nodding. Yes, yes, the war. We resisted nothing. Just listened to each other's pulses, listened to trucks ringing the distance. In murky bathwater, I read about Kissinger, the cold border, Osama. August too was a mastermind, distracting me toward your lima bean eyes. Why regret anything? We gave the Soviets their Vietnam, answered Brzezinski as an old man when asked if he, given the 40-year quagmire, would fund the Mujahideen again. Yes, yes. Who could blame him? He wanted to save Poland, his home, and he died having won. And Kandahar, an entire village, was eradicated. Not even the goats survived. But all I did was take off my clothes and eat cheese strings on the floor, safeguarded by the AC, Erykah Badu's Next Lifetime on repeat. Nothing sacred, you believed, traipsed in our flesh. Still, you let me touch you until our cries embarrassed us like government apologies. Holy, murmured a ghost into my hair. Holy fuck. Another suicide attack, another covert affair. Yes, yes, the war, we nodded in unjust shock. Foreign was a light we forgot to switch off. We never said blame us. We brushed our teeth, we flossed, then glided into a sleep, heavy as the wheels of a car. I think either read one more poem or two, but probably just this one. And I need to give a trigger warning because it has a lot of explicit violence in it. So be warned. This one has an epigraph from the BBC about a mass grave that was found outside of Kabul, Afghanistan's capital, in 2007. And I'll start by reading the epigraph. Afghan officials say they have uncovered a mass grave in an underground prison on the outskirts of Kabul, which dates from the Soviet era. Nostos. Lately, I've been moved by how the skeletons were found. Skulls with cloth around the eyes, wrist bones tied by rope. A miracle, that fabric. What color was it? what material has touched, even witnessed the suffering of those 2,000 men who stood naked with their eyes bound and were raped before they were shot. Among them, we suspect lie my great grandfather's and my mother's youngest brother's remains. What is it about the disappeared, that survival, this dumb extravagance, insults us so? I felt nothing when I slayed the Augies, my student, an ex-Marine, wrote. In fact, those barbarians felt easy, like buildings in Mazar-e Sharif. What could I have said? I praised the urgency of subject, her apt simile. To fight, you understand, was aimless. I've been primed for this, for disappearance, for all my life. I dreamt of my student that night, her voice muscling the soft framework of memory, whistling Leiche, Leiche, Leiche. Dearest, I wonder why in English the body is both dead and alive. But I know the blight of grief has a heart, and thus will love and learn, and thusly learn to hate. I want to believe that he too settled porous into the light. He was 21 when they took him in for questioning. My uncle, I mean. Do not return, my mother shouts from her sleep. Do not return. His eyes were green. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aria, for your poems. We're just so grateful for your work, and also just the questions and kind of things that you were processing and sharing with us is stuff that me and Chemistry Workshop and Kazumi and I have been thinking a lot too, in terms of art and poetry and the role of, because we hear a lot of times about poetry as something like holding witness to it. And I've been thinking a lot about that importance, but also what other role poetry can have. And so I'm still processing, I'm still like thinking of words. It's been difficult the past few weeks to be articulate, but I'm doing my best. So we will be having a conversation after the readings, but I'm really excited to introduce first Monica Suk, who is a Cambodian American poet and the daughter of former refugees. She's the author of A Nail the Evening Hangs On from Copper Canyon Press. Her work has been recognized with the Discovery Prize and from 92Y, and she has received fellowships and residencies from Poetry Society of America, the NEA, Kundiman and more. Monica has taught poetry to Southeast Asian youths at Bantu Serai and the Center for Empowering Refugees and Immigrants in Oakland, California.
Hello, thank you so much. You can see me, right? Thank you, APIC and Kearney Street Workshop. And yeah, Aria, glad to hear your poems. I feel like I've read those poems so many times, so I'm happy to share space with you. And of course, Josephine or Corina Orgasm. I just wanted to say that before I came to this event, there was an online rally that I attended, a ride for Black Trans Lives that the East Bay Queer Arts Center hosted. So I could faintly hear cars by Lake Merritt honking. And so I just wanted to say the names of two Black trans women who have been murdered recently, Dominique Remy Fells and Raya Milton. And if we could just take like a moment of silence, that would be great. Thank you. I want to just start by reading a poem by one of my favorite poets, June Jordan. Resolution number 1003. I will love who loves me. I will love as much as I am loved. I will hate who hates me. I will feel nothing for everyone oblivious to me. I will stay indifferent to indifference. I will live hostile to hostility. I will make myself a passionate and eager lover in response to passionate and eager love. I will be nobody's fool. I love that poem. Okay, I will go ahead and dive into some poems with kinship in mind. And yeah, again, I was so excited to hear Aria read and to kind of connect our poems, in this space. I'm going to start by reading Americans Dancing in the Heart of Darkness. It's the water festival. The city is a crowd. My skin full of sun, like so many country people who have come to Phnom Penh. The Americans hate me and I hate them, but they're the only students with me, and maybe I'm American too. Oh shit, I just realized like June Jordan wrote like I will hate who hates me, and I just kind of just connecting those, okay? When I return to my windowless room at the Golden Gate Hotel, I order fresh young coconut, a club sandwich, and French fries. A woman with a bruised face and a silver tray walks up 7 floors, knocks on my door. The exchange students order room service too, and the same woman walks the flights of stairs 9 more times. Fireworks crackle, and I think, I'll be back to this same festival with my family. In the morning, 30 missed calls. There has been a human stampede on the bridge to Kopek. 347 reported dead, 755 injured. Shoes litter the river. The exchange program advises us to stay away from Diamond Island. The Prime Minister's remarks, this is the worst thing to happen since the Khmer Rouge. The Americans agree. I grow quiet in my windowless room. I step outside for air. The city, a crowd disappearing. The crowd evacuated to the provinces. Cambodia, a perpetual stampede. School canceled at the university, a funerary ceremony instead. Do the Americans understand? The program director when she tells us that her son's neighbor has died? Most likely not. Later that evening, they still don't understand, but I go with them anyway to the heart of darkness, the nightclub empty but open. We dance with Khmer boys. Strobe lights pull us on the floor. This way, that. Our feet grope the shiny black tiles reflecting the bar where old expats sit with Khmer women making money. Yeah, it isn't expensive to get here or get back. We took a tuk-tuk and we dance. They laugh. Meanwhile, my mother calls me. My father calls me. My auntie calls me from Prang. My uncle down the street from the hotel. My uncle in Kandal. My cousin's uncle in Siem Reap. I think like Aria's poems, I'm also, writing in like Phnom Penh or Siem Reap, and I have a poem that's set in New York City, and I'll go ahead and read that as well. This is called Cruel Radiance. I take the R from 86th Street to teach poetry in Manhattan. My hands sweat on Cruel Radiance, the front cover photograph of a girl the Khmer Rouge executed, one of many children presumed counter-revolutionary enemies as the soiled descendants of such. My chest heaves. To everyone on the train, I do not say, all the sobbing inside of me, all of it, you know now, but you don't know what I am called, Enekajun, traitor of my roots. Instead, I catch the N across the platform, continue reading about S21. We were not inside those prisons. They were. Our hells almost certainly are not theirs. A white girl with a streak of blue hair falls flat on her back, her head a bowling ball close to my foot, her head a bowling ball that rolls on the floor. I look up from reading Cozy Existential Atmosphere, Adorno's words, and there a white girl on the ground, breathing, breathing, breathing. Someone call 911. Someone press the emergency button. Someone pull the girl up. Now she is sitting telling someone she's on her way to 23rd Street as the train screeches to my stop on 8th. Doors open. I see how the distinction between victim and executioner becomes blurred. I want to cancel class because why? So I can sob about the killing fields and how Nekjun feels? I'd rather do that today. My head could be a bowling ball too. I could fall over from this too. Sestina. There's a sister who works so hard she never talks. A sister who screams when she hears dogs bark. A sister whose breasts have grown dry. A sister who always hides. There's a time comrades come to the hut. They can't tell who's who. How many are you? Where's the other one hiding? That sister stays close, somewhere in a hole, closed off with dirt. Sometimes she sits with the sister whose baby lacked milk. In her place of hiding, she cries, thinks of comforting words, but her mouth goes dry. In a far village, where works the sister who never talks, the sunset. Finally, it's her chance, time to run back, but this time an owl screeches. She closes her eyes, she disappears, pretends she's the one who can fly. That sister's so quiet. How does that sister stay quiet? Biting her lips, she goes into hiding, between her teeth, the skin of a snake, hiding like a chasm in a field, a hole in the door to spy on the time, dark knot high up in a greasy tree, little dry well in a forgotten yard where sounds of smoke and fighting drive close. One sister soils her sarong. To wash it, the sisters search for water, but find, full of air, a balloon which, swollen in the river, makes the youngest scream and cry, she who holds hands walking around the open eyes, her own face hiding. Then the sister who never speaks begins to speak. I want to go home, she says, but home is not close at all. No salty plum juice, no rice or fish dried. That dream is dry. And tracing with a stick, a sister who closes a circle around them in the dirt, hiding them safely inside. This is a circle, a time warp around us sisters, so we can go back to when we girls were not hiding, when fear didn't dry us up and we could be whoever we were, dear sisters. A lot of my poems tend to center children or younger generations. And I struggled a lot trying to find a way to talk about my oppressors or those who were responsible for the genocide. I wrote a poem called The Death of Pol Pot. 1. My mother shoos us away, but I listen by the door. There are rumors of a black snake in the basement. It is 1998. The adults watch the news upstairs. On the screen, an old man is dying in his bed. The adults are talking loudly, 2 feet away from each other. From their voices, I can tell their hatred for that old man, a thin blanket to his chin. 2. I crawl out of a giant steaming pot, snickering to my brother. He always plays the victim. I love to do the evil laugh. My brother stumbles into a tent made from plastic chairs and a faux fur blanket. Nobody knows I am the villain because when I snap my fingers, I turn into a teacup or a wooden chair painted red. I'm going to read the twin poem, The Death of Henry Kissinger. Bubbles, children blow toward the sky, burst bombs into jasmine. Anything that flies on anything that moves. You got that? Got that. Roger that. And a mother's golden lotus bud orbiting her daughter's neck? Perhaps a giant kite to block B-52s. Balloons for my birthday party to bring on your jets? Go ahead. I dare you to send submarines too, to add anything that swims. Your idea of swimming is not dreaming, is not flight, but in Tekeo, at the edge of the forest, if a spot-billed duck were to lay an egg, well, it would be bad for you. Do you copy? Do you read me? Blue speckled egg, rebirth as revenge. It's an order. It's to be done. Over and out. I think I'm going to read just one more poem, and just wanted to say thank you again for this incredible space and look forward to the conversation after. This poem is called The Woman Who Was Small, Not Because the World Expanded. The elephants came out from the fields and carried me toward Chambak, toward a village doused in fires, so that in the pond fish had fried, and looking at that dead water was a woman I had seen running home each evening with a bucket in her hand. Always her speed was the hair that flew in my face. Always her feet sounding of tanks which made dogs bark and flee, footprints deep as trenches in the grass. This is the woman who had shrunk so small when the planes came, nobody could ever find her. And since more planes, she stayed as small as a spoon, and the world seemed to enlarge though nothing had changed. And when she saw me, she hid, threw pebbles at my ankles until I bowed down and easily picked her up, folding her inside a banana leaf. She slept. She slept well. She who is my mother, sleeping off the world again, whose person I hold in my hand when she wants to be held. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really great to hear your work, and Aria, it's great to hear your work as well. It's really needed, I feel like, at this time, honestly. So thank you very much. I think what we want to do is move into a conversation with y'all and kind of maybe dive a little bit more deeper into kinship, or kind of like the stuff that's been going on. Thank you for having us have that moment of silence. And I think, I think the other part to call out too, right, is the Trump administration and the way in which they've been attacking trans rights and really fucking with, so many different communities. So thank you for calling that out too. So I guess just to begin, I know y'all have been thinking about this too, and working through what kinship might mean here. I think, Aria, your poems, like you were saying, like truly thinking about, a lot of the time we do think a lot about the ways in which families have negatively affected us. And I think the way that you're looking at it is a lot more complex and it's working through a lot of things simultaneously. And I think, Monica, you too, and thinking like you're saying about children and everything. And something that I noticed common in between both of your poems was just like the way in which these, like I said, like these Cold War era regimes, like these violences that are like part of our history, they like live inside our bodies and they like are part of our kinship ties as well, even as we're trying to like think about things differently. Like they still haunt the poems, they still haunt the way in which we think about how we live inside ourselves, right? As we come and we do these poems. So I think the question is like, can y'all just, I think it's good to start with thinking about kinship as family, right? And so starting there, knowing the histories of what family even means for us, right? I think is important. So that's the question is, I think I can start with you, Monica, because I was thinking about like how you, just like the idea of the tank and like the conflation between the tank and the body and the movement really feels to me like a place we can start, because that was the last poem we did. So yeah, family, kinship, starting there.
Yeah. I mean, are you asking like what does kinship mean to me in this moment? I guess I could reframe it that way. I mean, I heard in your question too, like the kinds of traumas that we're already working through, which we've inherited. And these are collective traumas that our own people have been through as a result of US imperialism. I'm thinking about a conversation that I had with Aria recently about what kinship is like versus performative allyship. And we agreed that at the heart of kinship is love. And, you know, I did not know that that the Black community in America had advocated for Southeast Asian refugees to come to this country. And also before that, they had protested against the bombings, Nixon's secret bombings during the war. So, you know, when I read about that history of solidarity, it means so much to me. I very much deeply feel that kinship is connected to like liberation, right? But when it comes to like my own blood ties, my family, um, my, I think that there are a whole bunch of incredible toolkits and resources to figure out how to talk to your families. And there's something that's translated into Khmer that I came across like the other week. And I really appreciate that. And I know that it's heavy to talk about, um, police brutality with my parents, because they also understand what police brutality is in the context of Cambodia. So sometimes I think when I begin these conversations, I almost think that my parents don't know anything about what's going on, but they definitely do. They're listening, they're paying attention, and then they have their own experiences. I try to encourage my parents to vote, and my mother was like, I don't I don't care about voting, and I was telling her why she should care. But she made a point about how she feels that every American president is the same. And especially like through a foreign policy lens, just thinking about the wars that that just keep on enduring through certain American policies under every presidency. So when I heard that, I was like, damn, this conversation is going to be complex, and it was complex to begin with, but to acknowledge those deep-rooted traumas that also live in my mother's body. The tanks that appear in the poem where she's like running in her footsteps are as deep as trenches, right? I feel very deeply that that is alive in the conversations that we have about Black Lives Matter and about police brutality and the things that are happening today.
Thanks. And you said you were talking to Aria about this concept of love, so I want to give Aria a little bit of time to talk about this as well. But yeah, I'm also hearing everything that you're saying. But I do want to make sure that, because I was like, oh, like that's a connection. Let's do that. So yeah, can you tell us about that, Aria?
Yes, of course. I mean, first of all, thank you for the question. And Monica, thank you for sharing that story about your mother and what she said, because this actually just moved me to tears, because it's true. Every American president, when it comes to foreign policy, is the same. And that's like the bipartisan unity, right? That they just continue to impose violence on all of these other countries. A lot of our ancestral homelands still are being bombed by the US, and so many lives have been deemed invaluable even in this moment, which is probably why within like the Afghan diaspora, people will always have conversations about why all lives matter, and it's difficult to talk to them about these things because all of these violences coexist, right? Like violence against African Americans on American soil coexist with the violence that's happening abroad, and we shouldn't retreat to oppression Olympics. I think they're all inextricable from one another, and one liberation affects all the other liberations. I've been thinking about kinship a lot because I love that word. It's of course interesting because by definition and in its anthropological sense, it means blood relatives and like your immediate social ties. But the way I think of kinship, it's for me, it's chosen family. It's friendship that's based on radical love and on shared values and worldviews and like the desire to improve the earth and our living with one another in a society. Um, and I also think about the word ally and what it means to be in alliance with something and how that word has been co-opted by corporations. That was part of my and like our conversation recently with Monica, that it has become like kind of an empty bubble which people just appropriate in order to virtue signal in times like these. Um, I think when I think about kinship and who is my kin, I think about artists and poets who, as I said, share the same values. And at the end of the day, I believe that I would, yeah, stand more in solidarity with my chosen kin than with my blood relatives, and that's a hard thing to admit. But I think that that is where I stand. Even though, as Monica said, we shouldn't underestimate our elders. You know, I think anti-Blackness and racism is pervasive and it's rampant in our communities, at least in mine. I see it a lot in the Afghan community. But at the same time, our elders have been through so much, and there are so many parallels we can draw between police brutality and military brutality abroad. And there are connections that they have that they can make, and there is knowledge that we can learn from our elders. Yeah. So it's all very complex. None of it is black and white. And I think we should respect our blood relatives too. And we have a responsibility toward them as well, to educate them as we educate ourselves and to bring them along.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think like what y'all are touching on is really important, and maybe we can just keep going there, right? Which is, I think the complexity of like holding all of these histories together, and knowing that when we talk to our people, like um, that it's always gonna be this challenge. I think I'm personally like speaking for myself, like it's hard to be able to hold at once someone else's history and the reason why they're thinking the way that they're thinking, and respecting that and acknowledging that and loving them even in that, and yet also critique and like push to kind of see a bigger picture. And so I don't know if this is too personal, but if it's not, you can answer a different question. But like, have y'all been able to, I don't know, like do this kind of work? Because I want to be able to give people a chance to do this themselves as well. And so maybe, you know, if that's too hard a question, we can do something else. But if someone has something to say, I would love to hear like, what do these conversations look like for you? And maybe Monica, you said you just had a conversation like this, like, you know, how is that for you? And what do we do there?
I think it's an ongoing discussion that I have with my parents, and it's ongoing too because of the traumas they carry. Um, you know, in light of the pandemic, they're also navigating like anti-Asian racism too. Um, and that's connected, you know. So I guess there's a lot of conversation around like the people, the Black people in my life who nurture me. I talk to my families about like how these are the people who I care about. These are like real friendships, real genuine friendships. Um, and you know, they understand that. And all of speaking of kinship too, like all of my friends are like family, all of my chosen family, right? And when like I introduce friends to my mom and dad, they're like my parents like take them in as their daughters or their sons too. So yeah, I think that there's always an ongoing discussion about like what anti-Black racism looks like. There's always like things I have to say to my parents in the moment where I'm like, Dad, don't say that. That's racist. And he could be like defensive, like, no, I'm not being racist. I like everyone, whatever. But I'm like, no, no, no. But we have to talk about this, you know? So I think it's just a very persistent thing to keep pushing. And it's something that I need to do with myself as well, just to commit to anti-racism work every single day, every single day. You doesn't stop, right? So I guess that's kind of a picture of what a basic conversation might look like. But it also can get very heated because their traumas are going to be triggered. And at the same time, I think that we make progress simply by talking and simply by normalizing conversations. And that's just the most important thing is to just keep that conversation going. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I guess I can also share a story. With my parents, it's more gentle and similar to what you shared, Monica. It's like an ongoing thing. I have to do it with myself as well. Like anti-racism is not stagnant. It's not somewhere we arrive. It's like a continuous road, and there are so many dimensions to it. And part of it is so because we live in a society that operates on anti-Black racism. It's so ingrained in our imagination and our collective consciousness that there are like so many facets that we have to dismantle on a daily basis. But I think within like my extended family, my sister recently had an instance where she told one of our aunties that why it's not okay in a moment like this where it's all about Black Lives Matter to do a Facebook post that's about how all lives matter. And she got really defensive, and they got into a fight for many reasons, because first of all, it's not normal and within the Afghan community for a young 20-year-old to reprimand or educate an elder, first of all. So there is like this issue of respect towards the elders coming in, which is like an entirely different story, but also because her need to say all lives matter in a moment like this is triggered by a sort of tribalism, right? She wants to protect her tribe because she thinks about the bodies abroad, and the Afghans who have suffered. And I don't know, that conversation went on for a while, and I don't think we converted her in that sense, but at least we made her think about something incredibly uncomfortable for her, and work through a problem that she until that moment didn't even think was a question, right? So I think that's just something that we have to continue to do, and something I committed myself to do as well. And I think it was inspiring that my sister did, because I sometimes have trouble addressing my elders that way. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so as Michelle mentioned, you can drop a question in the chat if you have one, but I'll just keep asking questions if no one has any. I think Aria, you talked about before you read the poem, right, that you're like, you don't necessarily identify with the speaker of this poem anymore, and thinking about how we continue to radicalize and we continue to, you know, rethink who we are and what that means for us as poets. And so I was wondering if you could speak more, like, I know this is maybe new for you, as you're saying, like, it's been over the past few weeks, but then what do you feel like the role of a poet in this kind of radical work could be? Like, what is that to you now that you're in this new way of being in the world as a poet?
Wow, that's a huge question. I actually, yeah, I've had conversations like that within the past few weeks, and as you said, it's ongoing, and I'm like thinking through all of these things in real time as we speak. So I haven't arrived anywhere, and I don't want to be so boxing about what the role of a poet or an artist is. But for me personally, a poet is yeah, a poet is responsible for how the language works, and poetry is the soul of a nation. I think T.S. Eliot said that, but that always stayed with me. And like, what kind of nation do we live in, and how do we as poets who kind of influence language have the responsibility to also shape the soul of our nation, right? Like, how do I want to exist within the page, but also how do I want to exist outside of the page? That's something that I didn't think about actively for a long time. I mean, I've been radicalizing myself for a while, and maybe part of the reason that I haven't been working as an organizer or an activist in the last few years was also because I am going through the immigration process within the United States. So I don't have the same privileges as other people, and some activities may be deemed inappropriate while I am going through all of these visa interviews, yada yada yada. So there are other things that I'm protecting myself from, and I probably would behave in a different way if I had American citizenship. But I do believe that a poet or any artist has to work on expanding their imagination and their flexibility of thought. And in a moment like this, where all of these conversations are popping up into the mainstream discourse, stuff like prison abolition and police abolition, they've always been on the back burner for me. I didn't actively ever think that a world without police or without prisons was possible. And I'm almost embarrassed to admit that, but this is the first time in my life where I'm like noticing that it takes a collective imagination to create a different world, and how ingrained the prison image and like the police is in my mind, and how like a lot of it stems from propaganda like detective novels and true crime that I grew up on, because there is like that image of the romanticized cop in my mind, right? And like I have to dismantle that, and I have to work against my inner child. And part of that, I think, is just being a human on earth, and is not related to poetry, but it will eventually seep onto the page too, I think. Yeah.
I guess for me, I don't know the question anymore. I think it's like, what is the role of the poet? But not, I think it was much more nuanced than that. But I just want to say some stuff to add to what Aria was saying. Like, I mean, I've just been thinking about ways that poets are already holding institutions accountable, and also just ways that we are making language more inclusive. Um, you mentioned abolition, and I am really excited to read more of Mariam Kaba's work. She has been doing abolition work for a very long time. And I was like, I was reflecting, um, you know, since I came to Oakland almost 2 years ago, and connected with the Cambodian community here, I have been surrounded by abolitionists. And maybe I would tell my friends, yeah, I'm really inspired by this organizer or this activist. But I was like, oh, wait, they are hashtag abolishing ICE, like they are out here fighting against deportations. There was a movement called like, or maybe just a hashtag called Pardon Refugees, but yeah, there are Cambodian refugees who are wrongfully being deported to Cambodia, a country they've never been. These are folks who were displaced by war, maybe born in refugee camps. They don't know the language, they don't have family out there. So I've been actually just reflecting, since abolition has just been on my mind. It's been, following me since those actions I've taken with my own community. So when we talk about like abolishing the police, abolishing prisons, abolishing ICE, I think about how that has actually influenced my poetry and my poetics. Um, and I think this does have to do with kinship. We are actively imagining a liberatory world that in which we're also just imagining like new ways of protecting one another, providing safety, and also justice. So yeah, I feel like I am in kinship with those who are actively imagining that world. It is possible. and we have to act like it's possible. And I feel like I'm echoing maybe Angela Davis's words when I say that, not verbatim, but yeah, I'm thinking about what, how abolitionist frameworks have actually influenced me as a poet. Um, it definitely pushes our imagination. We have to, we have to abolish these institutions. Um, and like, one step to getting there is like defunding the police. That's a strategy to get to that eventual goal of abolishing the police. So yeah, it's something that I need to also continue educating myself on. So definitely I'm reading Mariam Kaba, Ruth Wilson Gilmore, Angela Davis. So thank you for that question. And it's just great to be able to talk to Arya face to face. We've been like audio noting each other in different time zones, right? So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, both of you. Thinking about so much that you all said, and there's a lot of thoughts running through my head. I think one thing that came to mind is at KSW, we have like, saying we have these like buttons that we pass on at events that say to imagine is to resist. And I've always been interested by that because to me, to imagine is not simply to resist or to react to something, but also to create. And I think that's a lot of what we're talking about here, Arya. I really appreciate also what you brought up around like that we're always learning and we're always, there are moments where people are at different levels of like being ready to understand what does like abolishing something mean and what does it mean to actually envision or create something that will serve us. I actually, yes, was it yesterday? Time is like blurring together, but I was on a media training with Movement for Black Lives and Reframe, and it was specifically for like communications folks. But what's some of the things that struck me, and I think it does connect to the work of poetry too, because communications is also like writing. A lot of a big part of it is that what we're seeing right now in this moment is they've been doing polls, and a lot of people, more people than like even 6 years ago, are things are changing. Like people are saying that like abolishing the police is a reasonable thing, and that's actually something that people would not have thought. Not this many people would have thought of that. And one thing they want to talk about is like it was something about communications and messaging, but what they were really saying is that it's because of all the stories we insist on and the stories we tell. We're not just saying like abolish the police, we're saying abolish the police because we envision this, and we envision actually investing and building community, like investing money and resources into communities who know what's best for them, who have known and advocated and fought for this for generations. And I'm just thinking a lot about that too, just in terms of when we write and when we make art, we're actually creating something that we know to be true. Yeah, so I'm just thinking about that too. I don't know if you want to add anything else.
Do you have a question?
I don't have a question. I'm very bad at this.
The question is, what do you think about what Michelle just said?
I love what you said, Michelle. That's what I think. I also love seeing y'all laugh. So this is a good moment. I don't know. I feel like, are there like audience questions as well? Because I'd be so happy to delve into those too.
We actually don't have any questions from the audience. It's a very quiet audience today. But I'm seeing like a lot of like hearts come up, clapping. There's like the ability to do these like emoticon things. One person likes this right now.
Sarah's linking us to
Sarah
everything.
is amazing.
Shout out to Sarah.
So it's like 4:38 on right now.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Do you want to
Let
Jason talk? Or...
Is Jason ready to talk?
Oh, I don't know. Okay, we can.
Jason's
okay.
waving.
We can.
I can also, I just want to ask like Arya, what's on your mind? We've covered a lot of stuff too in our audio notes that we're just not going to get to in this event, but hopefully we can keep on doing this work together and just build on these conversations. I'm so glad we could start here with Kearney Street Workshop with Michelle and Kazumi. Y'all are amazing. So yeah, what's on your mind?
So I've been thinking about what Michelle just said, to be honest, about how as poets and as creatives and artists of any type, we are part of like actively imagining a better world, and how I think I'm not sure whether it was a Solmaz Sharif interview where she talked about her own work as opposed to June Jordan's work. And she said that there are diagnostic poets and visionary poets, and that June Jordan, for example, is somebody who envisions a better world. And I think like part of me saying that I am becoming radicalized is that I am looking towards maybe in the future writing something where I imagine a better world instead of just looking back into history and diagnosing what has gone wrong, right? And like just like opening the wounds and studying them, and instead of that, like creating something else in my work, and how there is a difference between those types of writing. But I'm also, what Michelle also said reminded me of a tweet that I saw recently, that abolitionist work isn't just about tearing down systems and like destroying everything and creating anarchy, but it is something about building up a different world, right? And that we have to hold ourselves accountable to that, and that we also maybe when we explain abolitionist work to other people who might not be radicalized or might not be where we are right now, in order to meet them halfway, we always have to emphasize that it is about creating a different type of world, because that word abolition sounds so negative, right? It's like it has a negative connotation. And just like looking back at how I resisted embracing like the complete abolition of police or of prisons, maybe also was a fear of anarchy, which is also something that I've been conditioned to think is bad, right? Like I'm retraining myself at the moment to be more open about those things myself. So yeah, what's on my mind is really messy. What's on your mind, Monica?
I mean, my mind is really messy too. And earlier I was listening to this podcast called Call Your Girlfriend. And okay, I'm saying her name a lot, Miriam Kava, but she was a featured guest. And she was kind of addressing what you're talking about. Like, and she expanded my mind by saying, like, those who fight for climate change are doing abolitionist work, you know, because they are imagining a world. um, yeah, they're imagining a different way of doing things. You know, those who are advocating for like free school lunches, um, those who are advocating for uh, living wages, is also like doing abolitionist work. Yeah, I don't know. I feel so not enough when I say that it's so important to imagine a new world, you know, um, because maybe my imagination is still in this world, is sort of limited. And I'm wondering how language can help, uh, can help me get to a place where I never even imagined, I never dreamed of. And I mean, I think about like my ancestors, like I don't think they would have ever imagined me doing this work or being a poet. Um, and I can get really sentimental if I go there, which is not it's okay, but like I don't know if I want to go there. Um, yeah, I I think that sometimes I wonder about my experience as a poet. Um, I don't know if like I don't know if it's just poetry for me, you know? Um I've been at certain like rallies with my people, fighting against deportation, as I mentioned earlier. And I was riding my bike around Lake Merritt, and not everybody is able, to attend these rallies in person, and that's for many reasons. But I'm just thinking about like the spaces I've been in alongside this poetry world, or just being with poems, with my books on the page. And I think that imagining a new world for me has to do with, you know, feeling uncomfortable in my body and in certain spaces, and just continuing to do the work and continuing to have difficult and heavy conversations, while also learning how to do like boundary setting and learning how to manage my capacity, and making sure that I create space for joy and affirm the joys of others. And yeah, so I think right now, I guess I'm imagining new kinds of like safety, you know, just like I said earlier, like boundary setting as well. How that really benefits the friendship, how that really benefits relationships, how it begins sometimes with language. And maybe that language that I use doesn't always make it to the page. It could eventually, but you know, in conversation, in the ways I show up as a person every day to those with those who know me and with those who don't know me, how I want to treat my loved ones and those who I call my kin, but then also strangers too on the street. Um, I want to exude that kind of love for everyone. I think that there's a lot of imagining that needs to happen within ourselves in order to even create that world together. I think that's hard work, and I think it's possible.
Thank you guys. Also, yeah, I really feel that. I think what I'm thinking about too is Arya, you're talking about the way that it's possible to hold kinship, you know, as chosen family, right? And I think it's also very, and it's necessary, right? And like Monica, you're talking about like people on the street, like how do we create these kind of kinship ties outside of, right, the anthropological notion of what kinship is? Because, and this is the other part, right, is like I was reading Mark Rifkin, who was saying like it's not just that these kinship ties are by blood, like out of nothing, right? It's like these kinship ties that are forced on us to only be within the nuclear heteronormative family exists in order to further colonization, to further the oppression of queer people, to further private property, to disallow other ways of being with one another, right? To negate some communities what to them are, you know, like very deeply held ways of being with each other that are not heteronormative and aren't about the nuclear family, right? And so even for, I think, just the space of imagining a different kind of kinship is always so important, because even within that imagining space, right, whether you're going to your culture's traditions that are outside of, and we can say a lot too about like how genocide is also cultural, right? And so the capacity to imagine within a cultural space is also that capacity to resist that, right? And so we know that to be true. And so when we're imagining kinship ties, it's so important, right, to be able to keep pushing and to be able to at once think about where we have been and also where we're going, right? And you have a question?
There's a question.
Oh, there's a question.
From Ahmed. So Ahmed asks, Arya, you have crossed many lines, borders. The world has many lines tingling. I think of artists as people who color within the mess. But hearing you speak makes me feel that you have a vision of imagining a possibility to redraw the current rooted lines. Can you share with us a glimpse of that?
Redraw the current rooted lines.
I believe so.
Okay. Interesting. I actually, I don't know whether I have a vision to redraw the currently rooted lines. I believe that some version of me is a proponent of no borders, no nations, but I know actually, I don't know whether that's not possible. That's something that my past self might have said. I think that I don't know how to answer that question properly. I mean, ideally, I would imagine a world where people can move freely and are not bound to bureaucratic definitions and papers, and don't have to sit on rubber boats in order to enter a country where they can be safe, right? Ideally, I imagine a world where you live in a country that has all the resources that it needs and is not being bombed by a different type of country that has more material and global power. But I also believe in softening borders, and I want to imagine a world that is globalized, but globalized in a way that is based on love and not on oppression of weaker countries. So I don't know how redrawing the borders might look like, but I think that we need to soften them. And I think that that work needs to happen immediately and actively, and it needs to be part of abolition. And I think it is part of abolition, right? Because police and prisons are inextricable from the military. It all goes hand in hand. Maybe Monica has something to say to that too.
Monica is signifying that she would like to not say something.
She's deeply listening.
She is thinking about what's happening right now. Muriel wanted us to talk about friendship. So I just want to say that Monica is a very good friend of mine, and the reason why we're friends is because we get together and we talk shit on all the fucked up things that are happening in the world, and like vent and like allow ourselves that space. And so that's a form of kinship, right? Is like being able to be like, yo, like this is a messed up thing that's happening. And then Monica's like, yeah, that's messed up. I'm like, yeah. So then you can speak to that, Monica.
Yeah, friendship. Thank you, Muriel, for that question. Yes, I often think back to like Kazumi, your birthday, when you took me from the living room to the kitchen and you were like, I need you to meet all these other people because they also like to talk shit, you know? And I really appreciate you sharing how much we love to talk shit together because it is a really big part of our friendship. Yeah, I mean, I have been just thinking about like, you know, when Kazumi and I talk shit, sometimes it's really about like academia and just how difficult it is to be, you know, in those spaces. And where am I going with that? I guess where I'm going with that is oftentimes I don't I haven't found mentors in those kinds of spaces. Like I don't I I have I had like my first Asian American professor in like grad school. You know, I made it all the way from like elementary school, middle school, high school, college, and in my last semester, you know, of grad school, I had like two Asian American professors, sorry. Um, but during the times that I didn't have like a mentor, for example, I had like peer mentors. I had like real incredible friends, um, and friends now, you know, that hold me accountable and you know, share love and compassion with me and tell me what they're going through. You know, I am sheltering in place alone, and I am so grateful that I have like a patio in my backyard, and some friends who have who live around Oakland are able to just like share space with me at a distance. You know, it's something new that I'm doing. Whereas before I would just do like phone calls, audio notes, text, FaceTime, video chats. But I realized that to get through this time, I really do need human connection. I have been grieving a lot during this time. Just having lost a lot of loved ones. But, you know, in my grief, I need to feel witnessed. I need to be witnessed. That's part of my ritual personally. And sitting across from someone in real life and allowing them to just read my body language, um, feeling safe to even express that, right? To express my body, my grief with someone is really meaningful to me. I can say so much about friendship, and sometimes I just call these friendships like they're rooted very much in like a kind of sisterhood as well. Um, So I don't know how to break down those words, but I mean, I know how I feel when I'm in spaces where in which I feel safe and I can be myself, and I can be playful and I can joke around, and like I my dear friend Kim Lee Win had another Cambodian American writer had passed away due to COVID. And I just remember that the last time that we really got to spend time together in Philly was like last year. And she was like, I had been inside of like an academic space for too long and I couldn't really connect with people, even people who were in those rooms with me. But when I got to Philly and I hung out with Kim Lee, some things just melted. I was able to be myself again. So I definitely appreciate like, you know, the friends in my life who have held me down. And yeah, it's all love, and I mentioned accountability and I won't go too much into it, but I feel like that's something that my friends and I understand. Like we communicate, like friendships are not perfect either. There are going to be issues, but like we talk to each other, we talk to each other. We tell each other the harm that we've caused each other, and then we name it. We don't let it fester, and then we set our boundaries. We set up new communication. I think that's a way of imagining a new world within these friendships too. Yeah, yeah. What about you, Aria? What about friendships? We're friends. We're new friends. So
We are new friends. I'm excited for this friendship to develop. I loved what you said about sisterhood, like that friendship can be a type of sisterhood. I relate to that so much, but also holding one another accountable in that type of relationship is so true, and that you're growing. I often think of my friends as as I said, they're my chosen family and they're kind of like my real lovers. Friendships are my favorite types of relationships. I like love them. I love it so much. I don't even know. I mean, what a wonder that you meet people and you love them so much that you continue to be in conversation with one another for years, for decades, and to pick apart their minds and grow together, right? And it's like educating me so much, not just about the world, to be in conversation with my friends, but also about what it means to love, right? And what kind of work love is, because people do hurt each other, and there might be moments where friendships break apart, but then you find one another again. And yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this information right now, but I guess I think friendship is, oh yeah, friendship is a type of kinship. It's a type of sisterhood. It's a type of familial bond that we create with people that we choose, that a bond that we haven't been born into, and they come with a lot of responsibility and a lot of work, and the type of love is so pure in a way, and I don't want to miss it. And I think it's even more intense and beautiful when you find friendships within the writing community, because people, you share the same passion when it is with poetry, and you have like this unspoken understanding about the same things. But yeah, I mean, it's all love, as you said, Monica.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's our event. We're gonna close on some comments about friendship, and hopefully, I know a lot of my friends are out there in the little chat box down there, so I see
Yeah,
you.
the room lit up when we started talking about talking shit with friends. Everyone's like, "Yeah, I do that too. I love that." It was like the most lively the audience has been this whole time. But yeah, we want to just appreciate everybody for just sharing this space with us, and we're sending a lot of love and friendship to all of you, and to be sure that you're taking care of yourselves too, even as you're doing some very hard and necessary work. Want to thank Josephine, Kohinogasm, Monica, and Aria, and also like staff and volunteers. We have our intern Sarah, who's been dropping some like really important links into the chat, and then also Aaron, who did live closed captioning for us today. Also want to thank APIC and the United States of Asian American Festival and all the funders for that festival, San Francisco Arts Commission, Grants for the Arts, California Arts Council, National Endowment for the Arts. And also special shout out to, there's a number of people who actually donated to this event and sponsored tickets. So just want to say their name in appreciation. Susan Kobayashi, Celeste Chin, Long Vo, Alyssa Manansala, Aaron Halabe, Brennan DeFrisco, Gustavo Barahona Lopez, Michael Yochum, and Chen Chen. So thank you so much. And I'm going to drop into the box some links to some Bay Area and also I think global, I think one of these global organizations that are playing a key role in a lot of local protests going on. Is going to be Anti-Police Terror Project and in Bay Area Anti-Repression Community Bail Fund are doing a lot of organizing work, but also they have these bail funds set up for protesters, and also the Black Trans Protester Emergency Fund, which is a collective of organizations that are supporting specifically Black trans protesters with resources, medical care, and they're accepting donations to Cash App and PayPal. But I just want to make sure I share this out with you all. So yeah, I think I don't know if there's a Jason. I don't know if you need to come on and do like a spiel around PSW. Oh, we do want to say that there is an upcoming narrative basics course with Claire Light. And I don't know, Jason, if you want to share that and anything else.
Yeah, it's I just usually I have a lot to hold on. Yeah, usually I have a lot to. But like there, I mean, as with everyone else, we're all reimagining what we are going to be, the way things are now and the way things are becoming. And we're looking at that as an organization as well. And so, one of the things that, we do have still have things coming up. Please sign up for our mailing list at kearnystreet.org and just scroll to the bottom where hit mailing list and, stay in contact with us. And yeah, we do have a workshop coming up. We're looking at adding more workshops, online workshops. And, we have programs, we still have programs coming up. We have another reading that we're sponsoring with Jennifer S. Chang. I believe Monica might be part of that reading as well, and Muriel. No. So that's gonna be happening in July. So please stay up on what we're doing. There are certain things that are not happening this year. We did have to postpone things like Celebrate Your Body, and unfortunately, we are postponing Aperture, though. We are looking to bring something this fall, to kind of take its place, and something that is we can do online possibly, or something that's a bit more reimagined. But those two programs will come back, and hopefully sooner rather than later. Okay, and that's it. Thank y'all for coming. Really appreciate being here. Thank you, Monica, Aria, Josephine. This was amazing. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Are we? I don't know if we're still live.
I think we are.
It could be like after
Yeah,
the
Yeah,
after the
we're
credits
still
roll.
live. It's right at the end of Jason's talk.